inflation, one of the things that can solve all of it is income. If you have a really good income and you have excellent salary, inflation doesn't matter as much. Even things like real estate and interest rates aren't as big of an issue as if you have a really, really good income. So, what's affecting the employment market? There's quiet quitting, there's remote work, but there's also AI. How is AI affecting the employment market? Well, this article is a little bit about the future, but it also has some effect today. AI will force billions of workers to master new skills as tech revolution heats up. You know, we've covered this before in the last few months where AI has affected things like writing, copywriting, programming, coding, even things like uh, food service. There was a robot wait staff in a restaurant that was taking someone's job. This may not have affected your job yet, but companies make decisions based on the future. If they know that AI will be available to do some of these jobs in the future, they might not put as much time and money into creating job paths, career paths for actual humans. How do they do that? Well, a lot of times you'll see layoffs, and there's been a lot of layoffs. But another way they've done it is instead of quiet quitting, which is what employees do, companies do quiet cutting. Layoffs are down, but employers are still finding ways to cut jobs. How do they do it? They wake up to emails and team meetings. They're not fired, but their jobs are gone. Basically, you get reassigned to a crappier job, right? Receiving end of these memos, they're relieved that they're still employed, but then they have a sense of dread that their bosses secretly want them to leave. Facing a labor market that isn't as robust, remember that, isn't as robust as before, leading many to believe that the best option is to stay put with a worse job. Reassigning is definitely a huge part of the dynamic. That's what companies are doing. They're reassigning staff to roles which are not quite as, how should I say, rewarding or fulfilling. At least you have a job, and that's what the argument is. Employees to whom it would be costly to pay severance or month of employment benefits might decide to leave on their own if they feel stuck in a job they don't want. So it's kind of like, being a bad job makes you want to quit instead of firing you, so they don't have to pay you unemployment, severance pay, and they don't have to announce layoffs. A lot of times when they announce layoffs, the biggest expense is their stock price goes down because everybody else thinks they're going out of business. Many workers say they're worried whether their reassignment meant they would be eventually pushed out the door. So they might start job hunting early. I got the sense that it was like, we appreciate, so we didn't lay you off, so you can either make the best of this or go find another job somewhere else. This is another very strong reason why side gig, side hustle, whatever you want to call it, is desirable. Now, before you jump to the conclusion, it's like, I don't want a side gig, I don't know what to do, I don't want to work on my time off. That's fine. But look, anything that you do, even if you work for a company, basically is a side gig. It's just you have one client, you have one customer is your employer, right? And you might think, well, it's stable, it's solid. It's stable and solid until it isn't. The only difference between side gig and employment is for the time that your employer decides that you are valuable to their enterprise, you get a check every Friday. That's it. The only difference. If your efforts for that business or that company is not producing results for them, maybe none of your fault, then you aren't going to get a paycheck on Friday. They're going to either reassign you like we just saw, or they're going to lay you off or fire you. Here's the other difference is, if you are putting your future into the hands of an employer, in addition to you doing a good job and you producing good results, you have to trust that that employer is using those results beneficially, right? Let's say you're a great programmer, great coder. You know how to code, you're full stack, you do all the right, um, efficiencies of, fewer klocks for, the same program. But if your employer, your tech company, isn't good at marketing, they're not good at sales, they're not good at deploying these technological developments, then it doesn't matter how good of a coder you are because your employer is terrible at selling it or they're terrible at management, right? You've probably had the idea and you've read it in the news that the employees are the ones that do all the work for the company, which is true. The employees do all the work, right? In a restaurant, the waiters, the cooks, the maitre d', the front of house, back of house, all that staff, they're the ones who do all the work. But the owner is the one who gets all the profits. Why is that the case? Well, that's because employees are trading stability of a paycheck every Friday with their own work being more directly connected to the marketplace. That's the difference. If you have a company that you work for, they are the ones who are taking the risk of paying all their employees on Friday and making sure that they can take the fruits of those labors into the market and selling them. If you're good at what you do, you could sell them directly to the marketplace. Now, you don't have to quit your job to do this. You can start this on your own, on the side of your job. That's why they call it a side gig or a side hustle. And you can build it up and work it for as long as you want until you want to quit your job, until it gets big enough. Now, here's the thing. It doesn't have to be the same thing you do for a living. It can be something else that you like to do. Maybe if you're a programmer, but you like, wood carving and you want to carve little dogs or something, right? You can do that. Here's the scary part. You've read the statistics of people who say small businesses, 50% go out of business within 2 years, or, business startups fail within a couple years. Well, it's not just small businesses. Large companies have the same failure rate. IBM, General Motors have the same failure rate. The problem is General Motors is actually a combination of dozens and dozens or hundreds of smaller businesses. They have individual product lines, Chevrolet, GMC truck, right? Buick. Within those brands, they have separate products. They have Chevy Camaro, Chevy Corvette, Chevy 1500 truck, right? Any one of those smaller businesses can fail, which they do all the time. Like they stopped making the Chevy Camaro. Nobody says General Motors failed. Chevy Camaro failed. So what happened to those employees? Well, maybe they can get reabsorbed in other parts of the company, but the company is still big. But if they don't have that product line and it shrinks down, they don't need all those employees. They would have to add a new product line in order to absorb employees. They're not a jobs creation program. So if 1,000 employees get absorbed in General Motors because they stopped making Camaros, and 1,000 is a small number, where are they going to go? Unless they have a shortage in other areas, they're not going to just keep paying you to do work that they don't need, because if they needed the work, they'd have already done it. So these small business failures happens within big companies. That's why they have layoffs, right? And when Joe's Restaurant goes out of business and lays off 15 people, you don't hear about it that much. But when IBM or a large company lays off 10,000 people, you do hear about it, right? But it's the same thing. These business failures happen all the time because not everybody guesses right about what's going to happen in business, small or large. So if you do want to have a higher return on your investment of effort and time and knowledge, do it direct. Be a contractor. And you can still keep your primary job as a safety security measure, financial security. How do we know that this is the case? Well, here's another really good article. This person here actually retired. They maybe jumped the gun a little bit. Retired early and regretted it. I went back to work to continue building wealth. Continue building wealth. Retiring early is an American dream for some people, and you might not think that's reality, but with a side gig, you may be able to do it. The FIRE movement is, what they call that. But some early retirees have found that it's not as amazing as they thought, right? They wanted to continue providing value. Look, when you retire, not only do you have to stop working for a company, but you also have to stop doing something productive during the day. It's not like a vacation. A vacation, even if it lasts 1 or 2 or 3 weeks, once you get past about a month or two, you get bored. And vacations cost a lot of money. Vacation costs more money per day than just living at your house, right? So if you retire and you think it's going to be a vacation, I can travel all the time, that's going to burn through cash quick. If you just stay at your house, you're going to be bored. And you're not going to be providing value. You're not going to be feeling fulfilled about what your daily routine is like. So by creating some enterprise, like I said, building little wooden dogs, maybe printing stickers, could be anything, or doing programming or doing what you do for your regular job, you can have something you do. You don't have to do it all day, an hour or two a day, make a lot of money. Even if you keep your job and retire at a normal age of, let's say, 65, that enterprise you've built up can now be something that extends your retirement funds. It like turbocharges what you've saved up. So the question is there, what's the status of the job market, right? The job market is kind of schizophrenic right now. There's labor shortages, but there's also a lot of layoffs, right? But if you notice, the labor shortages are plaguing certain industries, right? Law enforcement, healthcare, and aviation. Pilots, air traffic control, police officers, schools, understaffed, teachers, bus drivers, social workers, childcare industry, police departments, prisons, right? What's the one common denominator about all these industries? I'll give you a hint. Let's take a look at where there's too many workers, remote workers, treating their jobs like gig work, and it's turning them into disconnected employees. So there's your answer, right? Everybody wants to be a remote worker because it's easier. You get to work from home. But even the remote workers feel less connected to the company's purpose because it's not required. During the pandemic, you have to do it because pandemic, but now it's not required. Well, people who are working in places you can't do remote work, there's a labor shortage because nobody really wants those jobs. Everybody wants to work from home. The answer is always to create your own enterprise. And look, think how much you make every week, month, year, whatever it is. It might seem like a big hurdle to make that much money on your own. But if you are of the belief that you are the main value to your employer, if you're a coder and you do make most of the value for your employer, then what do you need the employer for? Unless there is something that they add value, maybe sales, marketing, right? The other staff, which is true. But you can maybe replicate that over time with collaborating with other like-minded entrepreneurial people. But then what did you do? You just created another corporation. So you have to look at it from both sides. The best answer is to keep and maintain a primary employment, traditional job type income. To start early working on a revenue stream on the side gig, side hustle, whatever you want to call it. Sometimes those phrases aren't really helpful. And then once that gets built up to where it's self-sustaining, it's proven it can create the income you need permanently, it may take years to do that. Most businesses don't start out being $1 million businesses overnight. It may take many years to develop that. And you may go lots of period of time with no income. But what do you got to lose? I have a very close friend who worked a full-time job, 12 hours a day, full-time job, very, very high income, well into the six figures, high level executive type job. And he and I were talking about some administrative research projects that our company had. And I was kind of complaining to him that I can't really find anybody to do this. It's hard to find people. And he said, well, I'll do it. And this was by email. And I thought he was joking, right? And I was almost going to reply back by email like that it was a joke, because I couldn't even imagine him doing this kind of work. He was a very high level executive type person. But before I did, I thought about it, and I was thinking, well, what does this mean? So I asked him, what does this mean? What do you mean by that? He says, well, here's the thing. That kind of research, he knew about our company. He said, I know that the research doesn't need to be done instantly within the minute. As long as it's done within a day or two, it's fine. He said, look, when I come home from work at 9 o'clock at night, I have dinner, I sit down in front of, or, I change and I go in front of the computer and I just play around on the computer, sometimes play video games, sometimes do other things. If I'm going to be on the computer anyways, I could spend an hour or two online doing this work. It's the same kind of thing that I do and make a few bucks, right? So that's a mentality that people have. You have time during the day that's probably available. It might be half an hour, it might be an hour. Why not turn that into something not only that makes money for you today, it might not make any money for the first 6 months or a year. It might be free work, but it's free work for you. And now at the end of that year, now you have built up something that maybe makes $200 or $300 a month or $400 a month or $500 a month. And then you can build on that and have something that augments your current income. You can use that money for savings, for luxury, for discretionary purposes, but then keep building the business. Maybe someday now it's 10 times that big and it's making $4,000 a month. Well, now you can look at it like, well, gee, I know if I spend more time on it, I could maybe make enough money to get rid of my job. Look, it's easier said than done. I'm not saying this is easy, but it only happens if you start doing it and figuring out what it takes to create that enterprise. So as always, we wish you the best of success. Look for another video later. We're going to talk more about the housing market and some very surprising things coming out in the housing market that might indicate what the future is going to look like in the next 3 or 4 years for both renters, homeowners, interest rates, housing prices. So keep an eye on the channel. Probably in a couple hours, we'll have that going live, and we'll see what you think. I know you have an opinion about all this. Make sure you put your opinions below.